Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. Greetings to everybody and a very warm welcome on behalf of the Accountable Now team to this session, DA Dialogues, Dynamic Accountability in Practice. I'm going to hand over now to Mary Sprague to officially start the session. So Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Russell. Hello to everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for what we think is going to be a very exciting and interesting session on dynamic accountability and the role it can play in enabling locally led development. As Russell said, my name is Mary and I'm currently leading communications work at Accountable Now. Today, we're going to start off the session. Rahman and I will just share a brief introduction about today's topic, and then we're going to hand it over to Educo, who will be sharing about their suggestions, complaints, and commendation policy that guides the way that Educo collects feedback and uses that feedback to learn and course correct their programming. And we're also going to hear how this global policy has been adapted to different contexts. Then following Educo's presentation, we will be joined by our panel of experts and practitioners for a conversation on how their organizations are embedding dynamic accountability and how this approach is resulting in better outcomes for the people that are impacted by their work. Over to you, Rahman.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rahman and I want to start by saying a few words about Accountable Now. Russell, if you could kindly move the slide onward. So we are a global platform that supports civil society organizations and other actors within our sector to be more transparent, responsive, and accountable to the people that they work for and with. So our members are made up of international civil society organizations operating all over the world, but our work really extends beyond just international organizations. We collaborate with many types of actors within the sector to bring about change using dynamic accountability as a lever. And I think Mary has a bit of an icebreaker.
Before we kick off today's session, we wanted to start by building a shared understanding about accountability and how this might be practiced in a more dynamic way. So therefore, I would like to ask everyone, please, to think about some words or phrases that come to mind when you think about accountability, and please pop those into the chat box.
Okay, I'm seeing lots of very nice introduction: ethical responsibility, collaboration, responsibility, learning, taking responsibility for one's action. Yeah, I think we are really much circling and landing, I think, with Munny's and Keith and seeking, responding to feedback, respect, and unpacking this power dynamic. I really love that from Badru. And also, from Lauren, engagement and being responsive. And I think we're all throwing out the right words here. It's really, for us, this term accountability is around this interface and interaction between an organization and its multiple stakeholders. And it's around really connecting and building that relationship, right? And so, and I think everyone is throwing out some really interesting answer, and I think that's completely right. So Russell, if you could move us on to the next slide, I can maybe share a little bit around Accountable Now's approach to accountability, and I think this is a term that colleagues from Restless Development coined, but something that we really believe in, and this is also, the approach that we truly believe in as well. So for us, accountability is around that relationship piece with, the range of stakeholders that an organization might have. So you see on the screen, there's donors, government, boards, staff, partners, volunteers, and communities. But we also do not believe that accountability should be a static thing. So for us, accountability should really be, dynamic. But what do we mean by that, right? We mean that it's dynamic because it's a process that should be constantly done, continuously practiced, and collaborative in nature. So feeding back and forth between the different stakeholders and really in this collaboration, this engagement, how can we really make it, and as many of the participants have said in the chat, inclusive and accessible, especially to communities, because they are the ones whose lives are most impacted, and they're also the ones who knows what's best for them. And so we believe that in this deep collaboration, it's not just in terms of, you know, people having the seat at the table, but as someone puts it from our conversation yesterday, which I'm very glad to have been there for, it's around how can we build a table together? And how can we ensure that everyone is in the right place to do their role and to have their power play out?
What we also want to emphasize, and what we think is really important, is that dynamic accountability is not a checkbox exercise. It's an ongoing process that is grounded in continuous dialogue and meaningful engagement with all those impacted by our work. Also continuous reflection and adaptation. So dynamic accountability can and should play an important role, and it can be embedded through all stages of an organization's work, from thinking to doing to learning to improving. For example, when planning a new program or activity, organizations want to form true partnerships, thinking about being inclusive and consulting with all those who will be impacted by the work. We will hear more examples as well during the feature presentation and during our panel discussion that will demonstrate other ways that dynamic accountability can be practiced. And why do we practice this approach to accountability? Well, it's not only because it results in better and more sustainable outcomes for our work, but we also believe that such engagement and approach puts the communities truly at the center of decisions that affect their lives. And in doing so, it ensures that when we say locally led development, we mean locally led development.
Yeah, so enough about us. Let's hear from the range of examples that we have. So as we co-created this session with Educo, let's hear from Laura Cantle and Mostafizur Rahman, who will be sharing more about their suggestions, complaints, and commendation system. Over to you guys.
Thanks very much, Balhan. It's great to be able to participate in this session. Let me just see if I can add it. Okay, so for those of you who don't know us, Educo's work focuses on promoting and protecting children's rights and well-being. We work in 14 countries around the world, and we're also a member of Child Fund Alliance. So for us, working for children's rights means always placing children, adolescents, and their contexts at the center of what we do. And that is what inspires our approach to accountability. So children, families, communities at the center, and a culture of accountability at all levels of our work. So, so one of the key components of our approach to accountability is our feedback system, our suggestions, complaints, and commendation system, or SCC for short. And that's one way of making sure that we're really responding to people's needs in the best way possible. So we have a global SCC policy, as Balhan mentioned, which is the framework that guides our work and sets out roles and responsibilities. We then have SCC committees in each of our country offices who are responsible for coordinating the implementation of the SCC system in our work in that country, and also managing the SCC, so all the feedback that come in. And we also have a global SCC commission, which supports the committees and helps to capture learning and make sure that everyone is moving in the same direction, as well as also meeting our minimum standards. So we also have a series of SCC tools to support with setting up and managing the system. And they include guidelines and templates for the different stages of the process. So in terms of the steps we follow, after setting up the SCC committee, the first stage in the process is to consult with the people who participate in our projects. So children, families, communities, consult with them about what types of mechanisms they need or would prefer. and we have specific guidelines for doing this. And I'd just like to show you a couple of photos of people participating in these consultations. There we go. In the different countries we work in. So there's a couple of examples of people participating in these SCC consultations in some of the countries that Educo works in. So after the consultations, we then go back to the people that we talk to share our analysis of the results, and really to decide together which mechanisms should be put in place, when they should be put in place, how they should be managed, etc., to decide all elements of the process. So for us, this consultation process is really key to making sure that the mechanism, the SCC mechanism, the feedback mechanisms are actually used, and they're actually useful as well. So after the mechanisms are put in place, we then periodically evaluate whether they're working or not, using a similar format to the consultations. And the process then becomes a cycle, which should be continuously improving the mechanisms. So that's the idea. And that's a very, very brief overview of our approach to start us off. And at the moment, this is very much work in progress. We are gradually rolling out the system. Some country offices have been able to advance more than others with this. We don't want to move too fast because we need to make sure that we can really deal effectively with the SCC, the feedback that we receive. So we're very conscious of managing expectations as well. So with that kind of brief overview, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Mostafizur from Bangladesh, who will talk a bit about their experiences with the SCC system, and in particular with the consultations. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, and hello everyone. And warm greetings from Educo Bangladesh. And I'm going to share the experience, dynamic accountability which are being experienced in Bangladesh. And actually, transparency and accountability are the fundamentals of Sorry for interruption. Hello. Sorry. Transparency and accountability are the fundamental pillar of Educo's work. And what we understand about accountability is the building of relevant and significant dialogue with our stakeholders. And actually, do it by executing open day events and introducing SCC mechanism. In SCC mechanism, we have several user-friendly and accessible to participants. Such approach we use, such as the mobile phone, feedback box, email, and online approach in person, and so many approaches mechanism we used for presenting the suggestion, complaints, and commendation of project participants and other stakeholders. And why we need it? We need it to improve our to incorporate their opinion and their suggestion to improve our programs and to be trusted with the project participants and other stakeholders. And how we conduct open day events and consultation meetings. We have a well-equipped and rich, practical, user-friendly global implementation guideline of open day events and consultation meeting, and we use it thoroughly during carry out of open day events and consultation meeting. Due to during open day events, we actually share our information and collect SCC from our project participants, other stakeholders, and through the consultation meeting, we also have the other objective of consultation meeting. That means how we just take the suggestion or proposal from the participants who are our project participants, and according to their proposal, we adopt their proposal in our system, and we also share our SSC mechanism to them, so that if any mechanism not accessible to them, they can propose, and we incorporate our system, adopt it, and after that we introduce it in our project area, so that project participants can use it and present their SSC for responding and incorporating our SSC mechanism. And actually, we have some key question to during open day events. We invited and engaged the community people and project participants, duty bearer, like government department and local government authority, and everyone joined, and we invited the representative of these categories of participants, and they participated there, and they shared their experience, shared their opinion. We also share our organizational progress and financial status and activities, and according to, and we also present using different approach, like presentation mode and poster dissemination, poster hanging, and leaflet, festune. In various way, we shared our progress, and we also shared the SSC mechanism, and then we also collect the SSCs from this open day events. And in second part, we inserted the consultation meeting in open day events. We decided to insert consultation in open day event because we had time constraint, and we have the lack of resources. That's why we inserted it, and it has worked very well. And the participants got opportunity to share their opinion, and they they spontaneously participated. Like this way, we got the opportunity to get a huge number of suggestions. Among them, during consultation meeting, they proposed to introduce cell phone for presenting a suggestion, complaints, and commendation, and also they proposed to install community level SSC box, or it's called a feedback box. And another proposal they have given to as the committee, suggestion, complaint, and commendation committee at school level. And the bigger challenge is to meet all the proposal in in a quicker period of time or shortest time of your time. And this is our big challenge to manage due to our time, and because we need a lot of resources, so that it is not enough feasible for us to meet all the proposal of project participants. And another learning is we have got the response, tremendous response, and they become very proud to be part of these events, because they were asked to share their opinion, and and that's why they got ownership to make the process more useful. And we also encourage them to we used some key question to get some opinion, so that we can adopt their community level SSC mechanism, suggestion, complaint, commendation mechanism. What mechanism are there in place in the community? We asked them, and they suggested accordingly, and they proposed like cell phone, feedback box, and other things. And as per and we have some evidence, photographic evidence. You can see here. Here, these are the we have carried out open day and consultation meeting in the same events, but separate session. Here, the on behalf, and this is the children. He is writing his opinion, and here is the adolescent girl. She also asked and shared her opinion about a system mechanism, which is essential for their community context. And here is girl. He also shared her opinion. And this is the local government authority, the representative of local government. She is elected councillor. She is sharing, and she was responding one of the demand of the community participants. And here the adolescent boy also raising his voice. And this is the girl. She is submitting a written opinion or suggestion, complaint, commendation here. And we have several way of submission. One is direct submission, direct sharing by using microphone, and another one is written in VIP card. Here, another, the on behalf of secondary duty bearer, she was speaking before the audience, the participants of open day and consultation meetings. This is the participants registering as a participant in this event. And this is also local government representative. She is the women vice chairman of local government. She is addressing and giving commitment to the audience participants. and sometimes we refer the SCC or some opinion which are unable for us to meet, and we refer to the local government, and they usually accept and meet those demand of project participant. And this adolescent girl also sharing her opinion, and this boys also sharing. Here is the submitting of SCC mechanism. SCC box, using SCC box. And these are the whole scenario of our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura and Mostafizur, for this really good presentation that is kicking us off and then just giving us some initial ideas on what is it exactly that we're talking about when we speak about dynamic accountability. And as my colleague said, this is really about the opening those channels of communication so that you can engage with people, different types of people, children in the case of Educo, but with many others, so that they can inform the decision-making processes within civil society organizations. So before I present our panel, because we have some really good conversations, and I'm just going to encourage everyone in the chat, if you have any questions or things that you would like to hear more about from Educo, please do so. We will continue to speak with Laura and Mostafizur, but we also have a couple of other colleagues that I want to introduce you to. But before I do that, if you just allow me, I want to just zoom us in on a couple of things around the conversation that we want to have today. So of course, we want to think about the linkages between accountability, not just accountability, but dynamic accountability, locally led development, but in three particular areas. One, to begin, dynamic accountability, from the example that we just heard right now from Educo, it's really about devolving power. It's really about devolving decision-making to the communities and to the people that we really want to I don't want to say affect or impact, but that we just want to put them in a better situation in which they currently are in. That's one of the first things that really has to do with impact. Impact has been really mistaken with a lot of good indicators and really good stories of success, but it's really about sustainability, and it's about giving people back justice and better conditions of well-being. That's another thing that we need to think about. And then the last thing that I would also like us to discuss, and you're going to hear some examples from the other people within the panel, it's around how are we also engaging affected populations in the conversations that we're having. So it's really about the ownership, and it's really about how we can engage people who have been or in conditions of marginalized communities, like women, children, senior people, or many others who are not or do not have the opportunity to engage in these conversations, and really creating these spaces so that they can, one, so that their voices are heard, but two, so that we can actually listen to them as they should. And on the basis of that listening and on the basis of those conversations, we can really make sure that the work that we are carrying out is really helping them. And so on that note, if you allow me, I want to first introduce our colleague, another colleague also from Educo Bangladesh, Shafa Adriah Munny. Munny, can I hand over to you so you can present yourself, please?
Yes, hello, good evening to all. This is Shafa Adriah Munny, working as a coordinator monitoring evaluation, accountability and learning at Educo Bangladesh. So here I am also a member of National SCC Committee. Her SCC stands for Suggestions, Complaints and Commendations. And here we are 5 members in the committee, and we divided our working areas into 5 zones, and each of the committee members are assigned to a specific zone so that they can perform their tasks and responsibilities effectively. And our major roles include receiving and responding to the feedbacks we are having from different channels, and as well as establish the SCC mechanism here in Bangladesh, and also keeping in touch with the Global SCC Committee. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Munny, for that. And I will come back to you in a bit if you allow me. But now I want to introduce Sanjeeta Pant, who is from Accountability Lab. You're going to be hearing a lot of examples, so please bear with us. I think everyone in the panel really has some really good approaches, and then we'll have some time to discuss. Sanjeeta, if you please.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the team at Accountable Now for this opportunity. My name is Sanjeeta, and I'm the Programs and Learning Manager at Accountability Lab. I'm just going to give a very quick overview of the lab. We are a translocal network working in Asia, Africa, and the Americas to make governance work for people. And we do that through various ways, through our campaigns, knowledge and capacity building initiatives, as well as through creating communities and ecosystems that work together to solve local challenges. And today, particularly, I will be sharing our approach to closing feedback loops on local problems through our civic action teams, or in short, what we call CIVACs. So CIVAC started in 2015 after a major earthquake hit Nepal. What began as a way to deliver relief materials to affected communities soon evolved into a very dynamic process to gather citizen data and close the feedback loop through dialogue, but also very importantly about sharing, having a shared understanding of the challenges among local communities. The CIVACs is a two-way communication platform that enables communities to hold power holders accountable. So through CIVACs, we recruit local volunteers who collect data from citizens in an ongoing way, synthesize critical issues, as well as provide fora for the issues to be discussed with those in power, and then follow up on those commitments to ensure the implementation of decisions. And as you can see in the diagram, the model follows a circular feedback loop, which begins with listening to inform the collection and interpretation of information before moving on to a dissemination stage to grow awareness and buy-in, and then the action stage through which solutions are co-created and policy changes begin to take place. Just quickly, I just wanted to share our experience that this, what we know from this is that the process empowers people because it basically does three things very well. First, it helps identify any areas of misunderstanding in relation to authorities or decisions. Second, it creates regular touch points between people at different levels of social as well as political hierarchies, which build trust and accountability. And third, it drives action by amplifying the process and changing incentives for those in power. And the CIVACs have worked across different topics, so we've been able to replicate it in different contexts, but also on very different issues, from natural disasters to natural resource extraction issues, mis and disinformation related to COVID-19, as well as public service delivery. I will be happy to share more about our approach and some of the lessons we have learned while we are replicating it in different contexts as we get further into the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjeeta. So if you can start seeing and following us, I think it's really interesting because now we're not only talking about the communities, it's also about engaging the relationship between, so not just community with civil society organizations, but also communities with the government. We heard before from Mostafizur around how government was also involved in these processes, but that were led by civil society organizations, so that organizations can actually implement actions that serve the community. Now we're hearing about something that's slightly different, same type of approach, but slightly different. It's about changes in public policy. So that's also something that we're going to talk about. So now if I can hand over to PACT, we've invited Lauren Keevill, who is a governance advisor, and also Alysson Oakley, who is Vice President of Learning, Evidence, and Impact, so that they can share part of the work that they're doing, impact also to engage communities in the work that they're doing. Over to you both.
Thank you so much. And we're thrilled to be here. We're so happy to hear from others about their experiences and to learn and borrow from you, and to hopefully share a little bit back about what we're doing at PACT. So I'll start us off with just a few words about dynamic accountability at PACT. And I'll begin at the macro level and talk about how we hold ourselves accountable as a global organization. Then my colleague, Lauren Keevill, who is a governance advisor at PACT, will say a few more words about how we hold ourselves accountable at a more micro level through our projects. So PACT, for those of you who know, works in over 40 countries, supporting communities and projects ranging from health to governance to livelihoods and beyond. Next slide, please. And for over 50 years, PACT has worked in partnership with system stakeholders, ensuring they are fully engaged in our programs at every step. And this is codified in what we call our guiding star, which is an engaged community that leads and owns its own development. Last year, we decided to hold ourselves more accountable for that promise, and we developed a key performance indicator that measures the extent to which we are able to transfer power over our programs to system stakeholders. And we developed an assessment framework to do so. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you a quick example to illustrate what we mean, because some of these words get quite large and confusing. So this is an example from a real program, which has been anonymized, of course. You see on the top in dark green an example of how we provide a program-wide score, and below in lighter green some of the subdomains. We measure things such as the extent to which communities are engaged in budgetary reviews and decisions, determining program goals, reviewing performance data, leading feedback mechanisms, designing approaches, and so on. And so with this assessment approach, we can take stock of how we're doing across the organization. The quantitative nature makes that possible. We can also use it to help our programs prioritize their own strategies to improve along the way. So our goal is to push as far along that spectrum as possible, while recognizing that the goal is not a number, it's a journey, and an ongoing process and a commitment. So that's our dynamic accountability at an institutional level. So I'll pass to Lauren to talk a bit more about how we do so through our projects. So thanks, and over to you, Lauren.
Great. Hello, everybody. It is wonderful to be with all of you today. So beyond discrete interventions in individual projects, on the project level, the way that PACT practices dynamic accountability is by intentionally soliciting feedback from stakeholders. And this could include local partners, civil society members, communities, among others, and sequence that in a way that allows the feedback to practically inform project decision-making. And we use a lot of participatory and empowerment-focused approaches in our work to do just that. So what does this look like in practice? First, at PACT, we really emphasize and prize designing context-sensitive programming that involves tapping into our own country knowledge and learning, but it also means advocating for co-creation processes with our funders and for inception periods and projects that allow us to bring in and center local voices and concerns in the design and startup of projects. It also involves supporting projects to utilize approaches that allow projects to review, reflect, and respond to the local context. So I just want to offer some brief examples of what each of those can look like. First, in terms of review processes, that can look like something like an applied analysis, for example, like an applied political economy analysis, or doing direct stakeholder consultations. As an example, I spent 3 weeks in Sri Lanka at the end of last year during an inception period with colleagues, consulting with approximately 55 civil society organizations to understand challenges and opportunities currently facing civil society. Reflection approaches can be things like formal events, such as learning reviews, but also informal opportunities, such as holding space in management meetings or staff meetings to really make sense of what this information coming from review processes and other components of projects, what it really means for the management of a project. And finally, response opportunities. That can be something like flexible grant making opportunities, such as a rapid response fund, or intentionally sequencing some of these review and reflection processes with strategic moments in a project lifecycle. So just to finish the example I gave before about Sri Lanka, all of those CSO consultations directly informed our year one work plan and also our initial grant making window. So really directly informed the trajectory of the project. So in brief, this is how PACT applies dynamic accountability on the project level and really positions projects to practice adaptive management. And happy to talk more about this as we get into the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren, Alysson. This is really exciting. And I just want to quote what you just said around PACT solicits feedback from stakeholders. I think that up to now, that's the commonality in all the examples that we've been hearing. But I'm going to now present our last panelist, who is Dr. Suchi Gaur, who is Director of Global Engagement and Impact for the World YWCA. Suchi, yes, you are. Over to you so we can hear a little bit about the work that you're doing with women and young women, please.
Thank you so much, Rocio, for having me today. I'm joining from not from my usual location, so you might hear a little bit of noise on the background. Thanks Accountable Now for having this wonderful panel today. World YWCA is one of the oldest ecumenical faith-based women's rights movement in the world, and we are very proud of our work that we do at World YWCA around bringing women and young women closer to the world, to the issues that matter to them. If you can go on my slide, please. I work as the Director of Global Engagement and Impact at World YWCA. I have one of the most exciting roles. I say that I get to work with so many diverse women and young women around the world, bringing them into the picture, bringing them in closer to transparency and accountability principles through the work that we do, making sure that everything we do is co-created and co-led by them and not just for them. World YWCA has a very bold goal, which is that by 2035, we will be engaging 100 million young women and girls to transform power structures, to create justice, gender equality, and a world without violence and war, leading a sustainable YWCA movement, which is inclusive of all. Not just a YWCA movement, a movement of gender equality. And for this, one of the key tools that we have created with young women and women for the past many years has been our feminist consultation methodology, which is what I will be talking about and presenting a little today. World YWCA believes that it is important to create tools and systems which are much closer to the communities that we are trying to work with and engage with. We are community, we are the women and young women we work with. And if you can go to the next slide, what we present here is a tool that World YWCA has worked with young women. So in 2018, we went on a journey where we brought together a set of young women from around the world to co-create what does it feel like when women consult women, when young women consult young women in a feminist and accountable manner. And it took us 3.5 years, and during COVID, a process where we went through multiple set of steps to develop a 6-step process where we say that if you truly want to, in a more feminist, in a more community-driven manner, engage women and young women, consult with them through an evidence-based, research-based process, you need to follow these 6 steps. And the reality of this is that what we are trying to do with the feminist consultation methodology is reverse the process of evidence generation to not just make it representative of the reality, but also owned by the community. In simple terms, we also say that this feminist consultation methodology is trying to decolonize the way research is looked at and how evidence is looked at different from the people by people leading the process of evidence generation. Simple tools like surveys, like storytelling, like focus group discussions and interviews exist in this methodology, but from a feminist and more community-based lens. The step-by-step, simple language, focus on power shift, focus on co-ownership, focus on the process being co-led by young people is what drives this feminist consultation methodology. Over the past few years, we have beta tested and tested this methodology with more than 1,800 women. It was just launched last year. And currently we have 4 big researches that are being published. They've just been finalized in Asia region using this feminist consultation methodology. To just give you an example, one of the core researches that has been implemented using our feminist consultation methodology is in Rohingya community with young girls, where they are trying to access behaviors around reproductive rights and health services. Similarly, in Nepal, the feminist consultation methodology has been used by community women to engage young women, parliamentary decision makers, work with them around issues of women and young women. In one of our partners, Bedu Foundation, has also used the feminist consultation methodology in 5 countries to explore what mentorship looks like when it comes to women and young women. So all these researches and evidence-based, they are based on the foundation that the processes have to be led by the people who are engaged as the community whom we are trying to research. And this makes the research closer to the people. What we are getting as feedback after these processes and use of the feminist consultation methodologies, that it just doesn't stop at conducting the research. The evidence becomes co-owned by the community. There is a massive focus on community agreements, consent taking. There's massive focus on simplifying research methodologies and languages, which is why there is high sustainability of these tools and mechanism beyond the duration of a project. People feel that they can use this more, doesn't stop at a project. So YWCA is very excited about this because we have used this feminist consultation methodology to evaluate a multi-year grant by one of our government partners. We have also used this feminist consultation methodology to co-create our leadership, young women leadership training module. And now we are also as a part of the Big Six youth organizations around the world, we are using this methodology to co-design with young people what a young people-led funded program will look like. So they are writing the proposal by co-designing the proposal using the feminist consultation methodology. The application of this methodology lie everywhere because it is built on the principles of feminist accountability and good management. So we are very proud of it. I'm available today in this panel to answer more questions around this methodology. What we are trying to do with this methodology is basically making sure that we take research methods, evidence building closer to the community, to the people that matters, and make sure that they are funded for the work that they are that is dependent on their lives. And this makes them closer to the evidence, and they own the evidence even later on for advocacy that they want to do for their lives. Yeah, over to you, Rocio.
Thank you, Suchi. So on that note, so that's our full panel. As you can see, there are just different ways in which organizations can be accountable. And I particularly like this last example because it's really about challenging systemic approaches to development, if I can just put it like that in very simple terms. And I think that that is something where I would definitely want the panel to comment on, because this is quite interesting and exciting to see how it's not just about consulting on specific actions, on policy change, on the different types of tools and capacity strengthening that we sometimes give our communities and people, but it's really about something that goes beyond and that really also is challenging existing power structures within our sector, particularly thinking about how a lot of the funder community really wants to have this evidence-based approach in all the work that we do. But before we get to this point, because I know that this is probably where a lot of the conversation is going to head, there was a question in the chat, which is, I think it's simple, but it's quite complex, if I can put it like that. People really wanted to understand from Educo, and I think I would want to ask that question to everyone in the panel, is based on the approaches that you've shared, what are some of the initial results that you've seen? And I would particularly like to ask, how has your work been course corrected? A lot of the things that we've been hearing, it's like these really nice approaches that, they're of course the nice thing to do, they're the right thing to do, but in the end, at the end, what is that end result that we're observing in these more adaptable, open conversations that we're having with the wide range of stakeholders as we go along? So can I pass over first to Munny, and then I will go down the panel if everyone's okay with that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, here as Educo works for children, so I can mention here about an incident took place several months ago. So it was a humanitarian project of ours, and that was funded by ACID. So in that project, we used to run some learning centers where the WFP used to provide snacks to the children. Those who were studying in our learning centers, but suddenly they stopped that initiative, and at that time the drop rate was visible. Significant number of children left the learning center, and then we talked with them, and there was a demand from them that they want the snacks back. So considering that, we redesigned our new phase of that project, and we included budget to include snacks for them again. So hopefully the project will run according to their will. So this is just an example, but we are continuously incorporating their feedback and modifying our project strategies according to those.
Thank you, Munny,
Thank
for
you.
that. If I can just ask one follow-up question, which I think is something that will probably come up later on. How are you able to manage this tension between wanting to be responsive and, of course, the limitations in the budget? I saw on PACT's slide around their community engagement work. That is probably the lowest score. I know it's a journey, but this is, of course, always a tension that we need to manage in terms of managing expectations vis-a-vis the amount of resources that we have available. What's been your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Budget is one of our constraints in addressing each and every feedback from the beneficiary, from the participants. So this is not always possible, definitely, to address their feedback into our project strategies. So sometimes even in case of external funded projects, we cannot incorporate each and every feedback because their mismatches might happen between us and also the donor. Sometimes budget doesn't allow. So in some cases, what we do is we do collaboration with the local government. This is a demand. For example, I can mention here in our schools, there are children who sometimes claim that they need school bags or they need school dresses. So in those cases, if our budget doesn't allow, so we do collaboration with our local government or other local NGOs and try to get support from them. And if that's not possible sometimes, so in those cases we are unable to address those because budget is sometimes a really important issue in those cases.
Thank you for that, Munny. That's an ongoing tension, and I think that's something that we'll hear. Sanjeeta, can I now hand over to you also in terms of outcomes between facilitating this engagement between the community and governments, and also if there's anything that you've landed across budgets and any lessons learned that you can share on those lines?
So I would like to quickly give maybe like 2 examples. Our first one is from our work in Zimbabwe, and this is just to demonstrate how the CIVAX approach has been responsive to the needs of the communities. So in Zimbabwe, our work has been going on for 3 years, specifically focusing on service delivery issues. The communities we work with had identified issues around garbage collection, sanitation, and also lack of market infrastructure for informal workers as being very critical. And these were not issues that we sort of came up with, but when we went into the communities, we didn't know what were the issues that were going to come up. But those were the 3 things that were really critical for the community. And following constant facilitation and dialogue among residents and local leaders, as well as carrying out advocacy through different channels. The local government has now installed market stalls and bathrooms, as well as started collecting garbage from the neighborhood. So those are some examples. And what we often hear from communities is that the leaders are only visible during elections. So dynamic accountability really means making leaders accessible to the communities, right? So that for us is the impact, rather than just again doing the tick box exercises and the MNE saying this is we have consulted or reached out to this many community members or done this many consultations. What for us is important is how we are able to create these relationships and change the open up spaces basically for communities and power holders to interact. And one of the things that we've been able to do in Zimbabwe is we've created these WhatsApp groups that bring together local leaders and residents. So residents are now able to post pictures if there's a pothole, a broken electricity pole, or if there's uncollected garbage directly into the group chat and engage with leaders. So we are being very intentional about creating these spaces for two-way communication and feedback. And I think those also in terms, I think with this example as well, right? There's, if you get to the right issue and if you get the communities, like, if you really touch on the issues that the communities care about, I think sustainability, like the budget issue itself as well. I mean, creating these spaces don't always, some of the initiatives require budget, right? Of course, you need to have spaces, you need to have the resources, the people to actually go out there and create these spaces. But once those infrastructure and those structures have been, or those groups have been created, a lot of the things can sort of drive by itself, like these WhatsApp group. Now the communities themselves are engaging there. Our community volunteers are like, they are from the community, they live within the communities, so they are talking about issues and they're engaging in the communities beyond our engagement. Like even when we are not there, they are still talking to the local representatives. And I'll give you another example from Nepal, where we've worked extensively on migration issues. And that the issue around migration also started after the earthquake, while we were working mostly on solving community problems. And then we realized that migration was, because a lot of people are leaving the villages, and a lot of the issues actually go back to migration. So we are also helping communities connect the dots around some of these issues, because what seems apparent at first may not be the actual problem. So just to sum up my example, so in Nepal, following our constant advocacy and feedback, closing the feedback on some of these migration issues, now in some of the local units that we have worked with, local units recognize how migration is an important issue and needs to be prioritized. And this has meant that governments are now allocating budget for returning migrant workers. So since 2019, 6 municipalities that we've worked in have allocated budgets to work on migration, in part as a result of the efforts led by our community volunteers. And some municipalities have also formed committees with ward chairs to specifically address migration issues. Similarly, I think in terms of creating that ecosystem, I think that goes back to the issues around sustainability, ownership, as well as the resource challenge. The community volunteers, because they have engaged on these issues so much, they are recognized as genuine advocates, and also they are almost like local experts on these issues and are being reached out by local governments as well as national governments when designing these policies. So I think once you get to, if you identify the right issues that matter to the communities and bring in the local governments, and you are able to create that ecosystem, it sort of moves along in its own, right? So sometimes the budgetary aspect, of course, to be able to replicate it and make it larger, you need that budget push. But a lot of times, if you have the right people and the right networks, I think it also sort of you can sometimes get around the budget fact as well and continue to do the work.
Thank you, Sanjeeta. I particularly like the example with the WhatsApp group. I think that's actually very interesting, because while I was hearing you, something that I wanted to ask was, how do you keep both parties interested? No, one, the community is investing time in this, but then also governments willing to talk to them outside of election periods, no? Which I think is always the biggest thing, biggest challenge around social accountability and engaging with the community and the people. So thank you for that. Now, if I can ask Alysson and Lauren, so something that's been asked here, and I would also want to hear about, of course, any outcomes, core corrections that you faced. But then the other question that has been posted here is, how can you manage the tensions between, and not necessarily it can be about budget, but if you receive a feedback that for some reason you're not able to course correct, or you're not able to adapt or fulfill people's needs, and how do you manage that? How is that communicated? How do you get past this phase?
Thank you. I'll start us off, and I just wanted to say I love the comment earlier by Sanjeeta about accountability is also about making leaders accessible to communities. I think that's a real critical part that we forget. Just something as simple as accessibility can make a huge difference in how relationships and perceptions. So So this is great. I think, so the first question is about sort of reflection and using the assessment to improve, right? And what was wonderful about, and this was last year was the first year we did this whole assessment globally. And it was an amazing moment of self-reflection. It's, our program teams are embedded in local systems. They're part of the systems, and they're system stakeholders themselves and actors. And of course, good intentions are critical foundations for any kind of work, but good intentions need to be specified what good is. And I think the assessment helped us sort of clarify and specify what does it mean that we're trying to transfer power to those we're trying to serve. So that specificity is an important first step. And then looking at sort of people's scores, it was an amazing moment of self-reflection because, for all the good you think you're doing, if your score is low, it's for a reason. And so it helped to take a step back and provide a much more objective, sort of take out the emotion of the work and really focus on what it looks like. So it was sort of in a way of using evaluation as a tool for transformation and that sort of self-critical self-reflection. Of course, one challenge is the limitations of a project funded by an external funder. Dynamic accountability goes in all directions, and it's really hard when you don't have as much flexibility because of the nature of your contract or grant with your larger funder. So just as we try to have accountability for those we serve, we also have to have accountability to our funder. And some of you have mentioned the limitations of budget, for example, and how hard it is to respond to community needs when you actually physically aren't able to because of your own commitments to your funder. So that's a real challenge. And one thing we'd like to tackle next year is how to do this assessment and also sort of include an element of reflection on constraints a project has given their contractual obligations, and then how to use that learning to inform future project design and future negotiations with funders. I think it's an important but challenging aspect. Specifically on the topic of how to manage expectations from communities, I'll also pass it to my colleague Lauren, but I find that the more transparent we are about the program, the less challenge there is there, because there's more awareness about what the program is able to do, the less sort of mismatch between expectations and actually reality. So with that, I'll pass it to Lauren to take us forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Alysson.
Thanks, Alysson. And your last point is exactly right. I think that having that transparency and some of that upfront engagement, like I was describing before with that brief example about my time in Sri Lanka, for example, at the end of last year, being able to very clearly not in jargon, but actually clearly explaining what exactly the objective of the project is and the modalities through which we're able to work can really help build that, lay the foundation for more trusted dialogue in the future and have some of these difficult conversations, as Alysson was describing, around what a project is or isn't able to do, the ways in which we can or cannot respond to some of the feedback that we receive over the life of the project. And I think also, just going back to a point I made during the brief introduction earlier, I think that being mindful, thinking of the types of projects that PACT implements and the constraints that we experience working with external funders, really being very cognizant of what those strategic decision-making moments in a project lifecycle are, and timing the sequence of those inclusive learning moments to those moments in a project lifecycle can be really catalytic. So trying to make sure that the times where we're doing an APEA, the times where we're doing consultations, the moments where we're doing a learning review or a pause and reflect are coming at times where we can actually do something with that feedback and be responsive to it. So doing the best that you can at the beginning of a project to really map out those moments and be really clear with their project team and also with communities about where exactly we can make those shifts along the way, I think can help make that feedback loop feel more rapid, right? And really help build some of that engagement with communities. So that's just one other component that I would add.
Thanks, Lauren. I mean, yeah, I think, no, you both have really just now zoomed us in a really nice direction. It's really about the learning also. I think accountability is also about the learning. I agree with Alysson around the accessibility bit, but then also this issue around transparency, and how it's important to have these open conversations with the people that you're engaging with to make sure that you're working on the same level of information, and then based on that can make informed decisions. But then now if I can hand over to Suchi. So we've been talking about results, course correcting. I mean, in your case, we're talking about a methodology that really just flips things upside down completely, if I can just put it like that. Something that came in the chat box, and I know you already responded, but I think it would be good if everyone heard about this. When you decided to go in this direction of really thinking about a methodology for women, by women, what were there any internal challenges around carrying this out? No, I mean, a lot of us know unfortunately, I think we have good intentions. A lot of us continue to run under inertia. We've been in this sector for many, many years, and breaking that inertia becomes really complex. Can you share a little bit about your experience, maybe some lessons learned so that others can benefit from that? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I was part of the process since the very start, so I can talk a lot about the challenges we faced. But to be honest, first of all, just digesting the concept of, when we talk about women and young women, we are looking at a lot of formal and informal leaders around us. And, a lot of the times women have for decades shared with us how being part of UN processes, being part of processes in general, they have felt powerless. They have felt like they are consulted and heard, but they don't know what happens with things. And that there's no takeaway at the end of the day. It's like just listening to their own issues and a little bit of circling back. And so in 2018, when we ventured on this, it came from a big need of the community, the people that we work with, our movement, the young women in there. Because it was such a need-based thing for us, the first thing was to get the resources to do this. And 3.5 years is a long period of time to come up with something and publish it, to be honest. We went through various journeys where the project became also not supported by a donor, or not because of lack of intention, but because of lack of funding, duration of funding being closed. So the project, as you see, the methodology, as you see now, has been supported by a number of different partners that we have had. Everyone, however, when we showcased the intention, there was a massive, I would say, positivity around it, that yes, we want to invest in something which is different, because we are trying to, as you say, flip everything up and challenge what we are doing wrong, because we have looked at very different forms of evidence and we come up with the same kind of concepts where women have felt powerless. So within the methodology duration, yes, there was that period. There was a big challenge around donors and making sure that our partners are aligned with it. More so, even young women, as much as giving up power is difficult, even too much power is kind of confusing suddenly, oh, we have the right to make this choice. Oh, we can decide. The core group that was designing behind it, and World YWCA just became a platform. Our consultants helped becoming the facilitators. It was, as much as it was a challenge for us and our consultants to leave power and not define things for them, young women faced that challenge of, oh, we have the power to make decisions around here of how this will happen, why this will happen, question things. So it took time. And that kind of open dynamics was very endearing, just embracing everything they were coming up with and still challenging them around it, and them challenging each other around it. There was the group was massively geographically divided, the one which worked on this. And we had 3 set of groups that worked. There was 3 phases in which this process was completed. Even COVID happened during this period, and how COVID shifted the way of consultations kind of became a challenge as well as a positive space for us to explore how the methodology will shape up in terms of technology, in terms of shifting realities on ground, in terms of crisis, because we are working with women and young women in highly marginalized communities who are not just facing sexual and reproductive rights or violence issues, but are also living in conflict, in health issues, in lack of resources. So as I can say, I mean, there were series of challenges that we faced, but a number of them kept on coming back with the field, because the goal was to develop something which reverses the whole way that power has been taken away from the hands of community through traditional means of research and evidence building. And while we say we are following all the consent processes, we ask these questions. The process of consent taking in itself is disempowering. You give information, or are you just signing a paperwork? So in ethics of research and all of those dynamics, within that also many young women felt like, oh, we participate in these processes, and at the end of the day, we realize that we don't even know where this data is going. It's not being used by us. It is our data. And while we started doing this work, and when the final product was launched, I remember the first time we beta tested it, young women who were part of the evaluation using the FCM, they said very interesting thing, because we were researching the impact of changing narratives around sexual and reproductive health and rights and mental health in a project. And young women reflected and said during the process of FCM said, we always feel that the term marginalized is something we don't want to be called. It was such a stark reality because we use that term very loosely in the development sector. And young women reflected that we don't want to be called marginalized because you're putting the pressure on us. We want to be called underrepresented also, because it's not just about us. It is about people not giving us the spaces to be represented, to represent ourselves. And that helped even World YWCA shifting the language from most marginalized to most marginalized and underrepresented when we talk about women and young women. So in essence, these challenges that came in, the process timing, the timing, COVID, they all have resulted in making the tool more robust, more leader friendly, more language friendly, more power giving. And even for us, the accountability of how World YWCA is changing the ways that we have done things has highly evolved, because we want to do things right. We are one of the oldest women's movement. We come from colonial history, but now we are doing things right, even better with the way of how we do basic design work. So the FCM is used in everyday processes in its small form or in its big form, because this is not just about, you need to do a research end to end. If you go through the methodology, you can actually adopt these practices in everyday consultations within your everyday mundane tasks that generally we don't realize can be community led. So yeah, that's some of the pieces from our side.
Thank you, Suchi. I find it really amazing, and you're completely true. You've already put it in the chat box, but yes, language matters. And that's the first thing I think we all need to think about when we're really trying to engage with people and communities in a different capacity, and rebalance the existing power structures. That's like the very basic thing, and recognizing our own position of privilege and power, and then on the basis of that, try to not compensate, but just put ourselves in a different position, if I can just put it very simply like that. So I'm very mindful of time. We still have some time to go for some conversation, but just kind of leading on to the conversation that we have now. Based on all the work that all of you are doing, and this is the direction. Everyone is now talking about engaging more with people, with communities, being locally led, really having more devolving decision-making processes to that level. But how do we do that? Just to be very honest and candid, I think in this space, we're among friends. This is our job, and it's our job to have these consultations and these conversations and everything. But then when we're talking to people, to women, to children, this is them going out of their way so that they can engage, participate in processes that can be lengthy, that can involve hard negotiations, hard conversations. How do we go forward? What is that next phase for locally led development? Again, we all have it in our jargon, that this is the agenda in every direction, within organizations, with the funder community, bilaterals, multilaterals, everyone. How do we take this forward? I'm just going to throw it out there and see, what do you think?
I would like to quickly add, just share from our experience. I hear what you're saying, in terms of these processes, they may sound complicated, and especially when you're sitting down with power holders and, bringing community members who are not used to being in these spaces. So for us in our CIVAX model, what we have done, I think I don't have time to go through the whole organic process, how the CIVAX evolved during the 2015 earthquake in Nepal, and how it's sort of from trying to just bridge the gap between trying to provide relief materials, it then became more about, okay, there is an information gap, and then there was a need to do more advocacy. So the organic process that was, I don't have time to go over that, but I think just what we have, our learning is that because the whole process is driven by like community members, we often have community volunteers who are mostly like community journalists, local journalists, or like young students as fellows. So depending on, you know, what issue and what topic might, you know, come up, we sort of engage with, but they are always from the community, right? The local communities. And one of the things we realized was that to sort of manage that expectation from the community, initially we had started having these group meetings to try and identify, and I guess that's what would traditionally be called consultations. But we realized that people are not really able to talk in those spaces. So then our community, what we call community frontline activists, they are from the community, right? So they are in the neighborhood. So they just go and sit down with the community members, and it was more one-on-one. So if it's if we have them going talking to people, and then if they identify, like, you know, what are some of the common themes that are coming up, and then these one-on-one conversations have really helped. It's very time consuming, but it has really helped, one, for the CFAs to really understand the needs at that individual level, and then try to see, like, you know, how there may be other issues that we can try and bring in collectively. But more importantly, for the communities themselves, that really helps them understand and articulate the challenges as well. Through these conversations, they really understand, you know, they're able to understand, like, let's say, what didn't seem like a issue with migration, they slowly start seeing that this is not just about them, but there's a larger issue. Because sometimes when you, like, governance, accountability, people are not thinking about these issues, right? They are thinking from a very service delivery or, you know, perspective in a lot of times when we are working in the community, but they don't necessarily link it with lack of accountability and governance. And through these conversations, we are able to show them, like, you know, why it's important. And that, in a way, again, we don't want to say that the communities are not empowered and they don't know, but then these conversations help them really see it from a different perspective as well. And that enables them to talk about these issues in those larger meetings. And now, like at the town halls, sometimes they're like a lot more, like, you know, in some, they're even like 100 to 200 people who come, and community members are actually standing up and talking about the issues because they see the gaps, the challenges, whereas previously, before, like, you know, these conversations, especially the one-on-one individual conversations, have really helped us try and bridge that gap. And then that also goes back, because it's a continuous process, right? So you're constantly talking to the community. So the data that comes in, you're again feeding that back into the community. It's a lengthy process. It's very time consuming, but for us, that's been the biggest lesson. And also, it's the positive approach that we take. We've been able to create these relationships, because when communities are in these, let's say, the town hall meetings, previously there used to be a lot of blame game, right? You're blaming the local leaders, but we've also tried to facilitate the conversation in a way that's more solutions oriented and positive. So it's like, okay, there are these challenges, but how do we move forward? So I think our role has been like in convening and also facilitating those conversations. And I think as CSOs, we can try and do that as much as possible at the very hyper, like, you know, grassroots level as much as possible. And it's time consuming, it's resource intensive, but that's what's worth, I think, is one way to take it forward.
Thank you, Sanjeeta. Thank you for that. I completely agree. It's about co-owning and co-creating and making sure that we engage in matters that affect all of us. So thank you for that. You're completely right. Alysson, I saw you had raised your hand earlier. You're muted, Alysson.
It happens. Thank you. Thank you. I completely agree. And I just wanted to say two quick things. One is, I really appreciate your line, Rocio, about, we need a lot of talk about this out there, about locally led development, shift to power, all of which we completely agree about. But the reality is there's a lot of talk, but not much walking around it. And so it's wonderful to hear panelists and in the chat box about how people are actually doing this work. Truly, I'm struggling with things that are really hard to figure out. I think the first step is more transparency and honestly accountability for this topic itself in this sector. And just second thing, building off of what Sanjeeta was saying, is participation is a real burden on the participant. It takes a lot of time. And for a program to do it well, you need time. You need some space to build it in. But ironically, that's the one thing we often don't have is power over time in programming, especially if you have an external funder who requires you to deliver on targets. So I think we really need to be more intentional about building in the space and time to do this to do this right, and because otherwise we're just not doing what our promise is to do, and that's a real challenge. So I think intentionality is a critical second step to accountability and transparency on this topic.
Thanks, Alysson. I think, yeah, Munny, do you want to share anything before I come in?
Yes, I think you know, as sustainability is something we need to achieve after working a long period of time, actually, and when we are aiming to do community-led programs, and in those cases, actually involving people is challenging sometimes. But in those cases, actually, people need to be sensitized first. People need to have the ownership first about their problems, and they need to realize that they are the one who can solve their problems by their own, and who can find the best possible ways to overcome their issues. So in those cases, I believe the sensitization is a must, and after having clear understanding, people need to be followed up. They need to be they turn out to be good resource, so that they can be enough capacitated to solve their problems by themselves. So in those cases, community-based or organizations like Educo and other organizations, they can play the role of catalysts ahead there. They can they can create the enabling environment for the community, so that they can do their part effectively and efficiently, and in case they face any problem, then we can help them to overcome those. We can just suggest them the ways using which they can overcome their problems, and this way they can actually once they find that their approaches are helpful for their own sake, then they will have the ownership, and in future they will overcome their problems by their own. After having the ownership, once they realize that they are the one who are able to solve their problems solely. So till that point, organizations need to support them as a catalyst, actually. And I think these way things will go on in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Munny. And Lauren, do you have any final things to say with us?
No, I think that all of the panelists really summed it up well. A lot of it, and just going back to what Alysson was saying, I think that continuing to have these conversations with intention and really transparently being able to lead with what exactly we're able to do and within the constraints of a particular project does allow that foundation for that trusted relationship I was referencing before to be built. I think that, when we think about accountability loops, that answerability piece, that interface piece, that is really where catalytic change can happen. So continuing to build those spaces wherever possible and just being transparent about what we are and are not able to do in the life of our programming, I think is a really important step in the right direction in continuing to hold not just our projects accountable, but us as institutions.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, no, to everyone. Suchi had a family emergency, so she had to drop off, but thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I think that this has been a really great conversation, just following up on what has just been said. This is one of the areas of work where we definitely need to be more accountable, but in the lines of the learning, specifically zooming in on the learning, there's still a lot of us to learn. But there has been a lot of progress around really challenging and reflecting on how can we do our work better, no? Particularly because of the potential benefits, impacts that we can have on people's lives. And I think that it just sums up to that. There are a lot of things that have come up in the chat box. There are tons of questions that we didn't have time. This could have been probably like a 5-hour panel, but unfortunately we can't keep people that long. But if everyone is happy within the panel, we're happy to just recopilate and send all these questions and maybe send them out to the people that have registered for the conversation. But just to sum up, I think there are a lot of really good lessons learned and some really positive outcomes that come from the conversation in terms of what are some of the potential results that we can have about really engaging the people who we want to work with and for. That's the first thing. But then at the same time, I hear a lot that there's still a lot of conversations, pending conversations that we need to have with the funder community, particularly, allowing them, asking them to give us more space, more flexibility, bringing in more voices to the conversation, not just ours, but also giving us the possibility and opportunity to collect more feedback from the get-go, from the planning phase and the negotiation phase, which is probably that phase that happens very fast and it happens within our own offices, and then everything transpires, and that's still a conversation to be held. There's also a massive conversation to be held around what is it exactly that we are expecting to achieve through these programs. And going back to what Suchi mentioned, who is identifying those results, the indicators, the evidence that we are collecting, and who is that for specifically. And a lot of that continues to be for the funder community. And that's something that we definitely need to reassess and challenge, because it's really about them. It's not about us. It's really not about the funder community. It's really about where that impact lies on and where it ends. And so on that note, I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much again to all of you. Thank you to Laura and also to Mostafizur, and thank you Alysson, Lauren, Sanjeeta, and Munny for all your insights and for sharing your wonderful experiences and for the candid conversation.